Grief, it does not arrive in just one form. Sometimes it comes as heartbreak, sometimes it can unfold slowly, and sometimes it's in a future that had no chance. These are season 1 stories about grief and their unexpected lessons.
It was October 2006 in Orlando, Florida. The morning started just like any other. I was a journalist, I was a TV reporter, walk into the newsroom, I pitch a few stories during the morning meeting. Sometimes it was alleged corruption, sometimes it was a trial. I had reported on a lot of crime at that point. Murders, you name it. The kind of violence that just leaves people and a community broken. Well, that morning, I was assigned to the story of a missing child. 5 years old, autistic, nonverbal. The little boy had walked away from his grandparents' home in his little pajamas. Innocent. I imagine unaware of the dangers around him. I watched the search unfold. I remember the neighborhood was lined with these old trees. And I recall the little boy's family and their church community, they were out searching, desperately, calling his name, praying, combing every inch of the brush, every stretch of the pavement. You have to understand that after covering so much crime, I had learned to do my best to distance myself from emotion. So I was just watching. You have to do that in order to survive. But on that day, I won't forget because my heart was constantly in my throat. I just kept thinking, like, can you imagine the ache of your child just disappearing? I mean, that is a terror that no one else could see or feel but her in that very moment. And her fear, it just wrapped around me and it carried me back to a memory of my son when he spent his first days in the neonatal intensive care unit. He had been born at 29 weeks. That's almost 3 months early. He was so delicate. He was 3 pounds, 1 ounce. I spent 5 horrible, long weeks in the NICU with this little boy as he fought for every single breath of his life. There were so many nights I didn't know if my son would make it. And on that day, I carried that memory like a stone in my chest because in her terror, I recognized something that I knew very well. The kind of helplessness that sinks into your bones when a child is vulnerable and when all you can do as a parent is hope. And as my heart ached for that mother, my reporter eyes caught a shift in the scene. I noticed that the police had cordoned off an area. I saw boats, radios, and flashlights were slicing through the morning gloom on a small lake. And then the dogs arrived, specifically the bloodhounds. Okay, so years of experience had taught me the cruelty of a bloodhound's signal. If they bark, they have found something. So you are constantly hoping they don't bark. So their paws hit the deck. And on the boat, their noses are sweeping the air and the water. They're tracing a scent that's obviously invisible to everyone else. And then their bodies went rigid, their noses began to face down. And then I heard it. I felt like I swallowed a brick. And then the divers descended. They were cutting through the water with these slow, deliberate movements. And as the divers approached a section of the lake, they blocked my view. But something in the shift of their rhythm and the tension in their bodies, it was enough to tell the whole story. we now started to begin to understand what was laying beneath the water's surface right there beside those divers. And then in a single heartbeat, his mother made that connection. I heard her scream. It was raw, animalistic, it was piercing. I jumped because I didn't even realize she was standing right next to me. The best way that I can describe that scream was that it felt like a heart was breaking in real time. I could feel it in my chest. I could feel it in my stomach. I could feel it in my whole body. And just everything was sharper and more intense because I was pregnant. I was a few months along with my second son. Pregnancy hormones, they don't exactly help you stay calm, which is why her scream shattered every ounce of my professional detachment on that day. I dropped everything, my notebook, my microphone, and I just wept for that mother. In the midst of it all, I had formed a bond in this universal language of a mother's love and worry. The only thing I can say is her terror was no longer hers alone, because it passed through me and it made me human in the rawest sense. I have since left journalism, but looking back, I realized this. Detachment might protect you in life, but compassion is what truly connects us all. In a tragedy, people often worry that they don't have the right words. Don't worry about that. You don't need the right words. Compassion isn't spoken, it's shown. It's our attention, it's our hearts, it's our presence. That sometimes can be enough in these dark moments.
I had just stepped off of a cruise of a lifetime with my husband, my daughter, and my mother-in-law, Linda. In fact, I was still sun-kissed when we got the call that changed everything. At 79, Linda was a ball of energy. She didn't just talk, she communicated with her whole little body. She was tiny. I mean, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. But wow, she was fast. Her walk, it had this signature twist where one leg would sort of turn slightly inward. And her hands, they had just as much personality. They were arthritic and they were delicate, and her fingers would fold over themselves like crinkled paper. I can still see those fingers holding on to the margarita on the cruise. But just a few days later, Linda would have a massive stroke. And those same hands were suddenly struggling to hold a spoon. And while she was losing the ability to control her body, I was also lost. I was losing the ability to understand the system that was supposed to help her. I found myself so frustrated having to repeat her medical history to the cardiologist, the neurologist, the nurse. And I was just wondering, how does such a sophisticated hospital system function when no one seems to see the big picture of her story? Every day I was met with these drive-by consultations where doctors would share with me, I don't know, for example, oh, these are her potassium levels. And I just felt so stupid for not understanding, okay, why do those metrics matter? And what does this mean for her life? Her care team was almost like a race car pit crew. Every mechanic is this like world-class genius at like changing one specific bolt. But no one was able to step back and tell me, what is happening to this whole car? We live in a world where AI can detect microscopic tumors and machines can breathe for a human. Yet, I couldn't find a soul who knew the details that I had learned by just literally sitting next to Linda every day. I mean, I had just learned about her medical history myself. In fact, on the same day that they probably did. I wasn't more knowledgeable. It's probably just more invested. And the thing is when you're that invested, you notice things that the data or the machines can't capture. For example, Linda's weight was dropping pretty rapidly. She was like 90 pounds and 85 pounds, 76 pounds. I mean, she was refusing food. But I knew that Linda loved sweets. So I would blend these nutritional shakes into an Oreo milkshake, hiding the extra calories. Forgive me, Linda. But before giving it to her, I'd sit there and I would pick out the thick chocolate pieces one by one because I was terrified that she might choke. And there's one doctor, he saw me and he asked this question I'll never forget. He wasn't typing, he wasn't scanning with his monitor. He was looking directly at me and he said, "Is she your mother or your mother-in-law?" When I told him that she was my mother-in-law, he genuinely looked surprised. So I explained to him, look, Linda is the kind of mother-in-law that people probably don't believe exists. From the moment she met me, there was no judgment, just genuine warmth. And my husband had just taken this brand new job. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I could stop and just be with her. And I think part of the reason why I could do that was because she had always given her full attention to our family. I mean, she would joyfully take in all of the kids' stories, their tiny triumphs. She listened like they were front page news. I can't tell you how many times my husband and I, we wondered, how are we going to explain this? How are we going to explain this reality to the kids when we barely have answers ourselves? That's what pushed me to do something I never imagined I would do. I turned to artificial intelligence. Here I was, standing there in front of a literal machine to tell me the truth, gently. Can you take all of this coldness and tell me, how much time does she have? At this point, I don't even know if I remember what ChatGPT said, but I remember that it was pretty close. Linda passed 4 months after that cruise. And I do carry some regret with me because I could have pushed harder. I could have asked the doctors to slow down, to be clearer, to help us face what was coming. But I think part of me was afraid to hear it spoken out loud. Looking back, we spend so much time debating when AI will replace humans, but what unsettles me more is how all of this exposure to data and digital systems can make human interaction feel less personal. Replacing eye contact with screens, vulnerable conversations reduced to text, and doctors that are typing through moments that call for presence. We keep asking when machines will take over. The harder question is whether we've already started letting them. It was February, and my first son had just turned 1 year old. He was babbling and discovering the world, and I wanted another. So when I saw those 2 pink lines, I told everyone. My first son had arrived 11 weeks early, so I did know fear, but I didn't want to let the fear take over. So I waited for the routine ultrasound, expecting to hear that reassuring little tiny heartbeat. Instead, the doctor just stared at the ultrasound machine. The heartbeat is very low. Too low, she said. And in that moment, I was right back in that NICU. 5 weeks of monitors and alarms. 5 weeks of holding my breath, feeling every ounce of helplessness and guilt. I had blamed myself for why he came too early. That fear, that guilt, the questions, can I even keep a baby alive? They just all flooded back at once. And her tone, it was flat, and it was practiced, and it was like a knife. You know, the miscarriage alone was crushing, but her delivery, she made it worse. This was a Tuesday for her. But for me, it was a lifetime filled with so much future. And it was just gone. The first steps, the first day of school. The doctor didn't tell me when it would happen, so that afternoon, I guess still in shock, I went to a baseball game in Orlando. I mean, I already had the tickets. I guess I thought at the time that this distraction might quiet the noise that was in my head. About an hour into the game, this cramp slices through me. It was sharp, it was sudden, and in that bathroom stall, everything happened all at once. It came so quickly and so forcefully, and I was just in shock. I remember I pulled my jeans back on just to contain it, and they soaked through in seconds. So I called the doctor. And I'll never forget what she said, because she said, go home and let it process itself. The next day, I just spiraled. It was like every movement was me walking through water, even from the bedroom to the bathroom. So I called my boss and I said, I'm going to need another day. And she says, I thought you said you were fine. Yeah, I had said I was fine, but that was literally minutes after it happened. My mind was clearly in a fog. I was not fine then. I was not fine now. Look, I understand that people are in work mode, especially in a newsroom where you have this exposure to trauma and tragedy and it becomes a part of the job. But that hurt because she was treating me like I was supposed to snap back, like my pain could just fit neatly into some news cycle. 2 months later, I'm back at work. I'm at a press conference, the ordinary. And then suddenly this pressure sends me right back to another bathroom stall in a public place. Wow. My body had retained part of the pregnancy. And now it had decided it was going to let it go. I know the doctor had told me 2 months ago to let it process itself, but what I was looking at, I was not processing for me. There are 2 moments that I still return to when I think about this story. It's the way that the doctor spoke to me, and of course, my boss. And for a long time, I would replay them in my head. And they mattered, but they're not the center of this story. The center of this story is forgiveness. First, I had to forgive myself. After this premature birth, I beat myself up about whether or not I could carry a child. And that haunted me, and eventually I had to put that down. I also had to forgive those who hurt me without meaning to, because I know that the doctor and my boss, they didn't intend to hurt me. Looking back, forgiveness, it doesn't undo what happened, but it does alter the weight of it. It allows you to hold that grief without being consumed. And that was a gift. And it was a gift that I really needed to give myself. And so I want to ask you, what do you find hard to forgive? Loss. It teaches us how deeply we can love and also how fragile life can be. If these stories touched you, then you already understand the most important truth about grief. That while we do survive it, more importantly, we grow through it. Thank you so much for watching and for growing with me.